to a COVID-19 healthcare panel featuring reality TV personalities. I do want to give a quick note that Whitney Williams unfortunately can't join us today, but we still have the lovely Britini and Claire. So I want to begin by thanking the panelists, our audience, as well as the LMU Bioethics Institute for sponsoring this event. How I kind of envision this panel going is I am going to introduce myself as well as both of the panelists, after which they will present a bit about themselves and their careers, followed by a 10-minute Q&A exclusively about the content of their presentations. And those questions are courtesy of our very own LMU Bioethics undergrad intern, Grace. And then, of course, we reserved 10 minutes at the end for Big Brother related questions, because we know that's what you guys want to hear. And those were submitted to us via Instagram as well as the webinar registration page. So thank you so much for attending, guys, and let's get into it. My name is Hannah Chaddha. If you don't know who I am a second-year graduate student at Loyola Marymount University, and I'm currently getting my master's in bioethics. A bit about my background is I majored in biology and Spanish at the University of Illinois, and I graduated in May of 2020, so it's been a couple years. And bioethics piqued my interest because of my passion for medicine. That's what I ultimately want to do. But I feel as though the humanitarian side of medical practice has become less important as technology has advanced so rapidly. So I feel like a graduate education in bioethics will give me a unique perspective as a physician, navigating a whole different set of ethical issues that come from modern clinical research, biomedical technology, et cetera. It's also very neat to be able to study bioethics in the middle of a global pandemic in real time, because we explore issues like, in the middle of a global pandemic, who should be vaccinated first? When there are scarce resources, who ought to be ventilated and who has to wait? So I am very unfortunate to be a bioethics grad student. And in terms of how COVID affected my education, I did have to do the first year of my program from my parents' home in Chicago. And by the time I moved out to LA for school in January of this year, so just a couple months ago, and by the time I resumed my program, I had completely forgotten what it was like to physically be around others in a classroom setting. It was so strange and foreign to me. And while online learning does give more flexibility and the ability to connect with people all over the world, I definitely realized that I was craving interpersonal connection and being able to feed off of other students and the professor in an actual classroom. And after obtaining my master's from LMU, I plan to attend medical school and pursue either anesthesia or psychiatry. So enough about me, because I'm boring. Let's move on to Britini and Claire, whom I love so much. I met Britini and Claire almost a year ago, can you guys believe it, in a very strange environment where it's beneficial to share as little about your personal life as possible. The Big Brother house. Often people lie about their occupations, their age, their accomplishments, etc. in the game. So it wasn't until we got out of that environment that I was able to uncover just the surface about who and what each panelist truly is and what they stand for. And that's been such a blessing for me, because both of these women are such a delight and they've achieved so much in their 24/25 years of living. So interestingly enough, this is also my first time kind of doing a deep dive with them into what they're about and what they've done and where they plan on going. So I'm in the same boat as everyone who's in this webinar. It's important to acknowledge how COVID-19 has changed a lot for all of us, and that's why we wanted to use COVID-19 as our anchoring topic, because it's something that everyone can relate to. And I would love to be enlightened as to how COVID-19 has made lasting changes in each of their fields and industries, to foster a sense of shared experience and solidarity amongst all of us, even though all of us come from very different backgrounds and have very different careers. So that's kind of the goal of this panel. To give you a brief background on each panelist, from the little information that I do know about them, about their real lives. Britini recently obtained her master's in education and is currently working towards becoming a teacher. And Claire is an artificial intelligence engineer that works for Microsoft. And I'm forever in awe of Claire and think she has like the coolest job ever. And like I said, unfortunately, Whitney is not here with us. But first up, we are going to have Britini take it away.
My name is Britini Dangelo. I am 24 years old. I currently reside in Niagara Falls, New York, but I'm currently, as of right now, in a hotel room in Orlando, Florida, because we're obsessed with Disney World and it's a real thing. But a little bit about my background. So I've always had varying interests, a lot of interests in a lot of different fields. I knew that my interests were going to end in me being a teacher, but that was not the route that I went. Like my bachelor's was not in education. My bachelor's degrees, I ended up doing a dual degree, which means that I did 2 different bachelor's degrees in the same 4-year time span, which meant a lot of summer classes, 18 credit hours every single semester, and a lot of all-nighters. But we did it, so we're here. My dual degree is in theater performance. So I had a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theater Performance and a Bachelor of Arts in Communications and Media Studies. I also had a minor in American Sign Language and Deaf Studies on top of that as well. So graduated with all 3 of those things in 2019. From there, I left 8 days after graduation and I flew out to Missoula, Montana, which is a town in nowhere in Montana, to work for the largest children's theater company in the world, large children's touring theater company, where I traveled to a different city every single week, taught kids from 5 to 18 a full-length musical in a week's time. That was where I really started to understand the age group that I wanted to teach, why I liked teaching theater, what specializations I wanted to teach in. And it really just gave me the opportunity through teaching the musical every week and also workshops where I wanted to go in the teaching field. Obviously, COVID happened March of 2020. I was in Washington State. I was actually in Seattle. So I was at the epicenter in March and in February of when COVID was happening while I was on tour. And there was so much uncertainty in terms of, are we going to keep our jobs? We obviously did not. We all got laid off. So I came back home, was home for 2 months. And then I, as well as Chaddha, I did my entire master's program during COVID. So I did my entire master's program from May of 2020 until May of 2021. Thankfully for me, by the fall of 2020, I was able to go into schools with masks and I was able to interact with the kids, but it was a very different environment because obviously I was working with kindergartners, first graders, 5th and 6th graders with masks on. And with COVID, a lot of my students were having trouble socializing because we always had to keep a distance. And then in our school district, half of our kids came on Monday and Tuesday. We all met together virtually Wednesday, and then half of our kids came the other Thursday and Friday. So it was very challenging for the kids. It was challenging for the teachers, but we all got through it. It was great. I did my student teaching in 2021. So I student taught in a 6th grade room, in a kindergarten classroom, very different atmospheres. Obviously, they're like 7 years apart. And then I graduated with that master's degree in early childhood and childhood education, May of 2021. And then I also have additional certifications in special ed 1 to 6 and theater ed K to 12. Then June came, and that's when I was taken for Big Brother. And that's where I met these lovely, wonderful women that are here. And now, since becoming off the show, because I was in jury and obviously made it till October, I couldn't take my own room. But I was able to get a building-based sub job. So now I sub for grades 2 through 6. I can sub anywhere that they ask me to. I can sub in the special ed rooms. I can sub in general. I can sub in gym. Gym's a fun one. I can sub in theater. It doesn't really matter where I go. But any opportunity that I have to inspire my kids and to be a little light in their day that day is what's worth it for me. And I truly have found, at least this year, it's been so fulfilling for me to be a substitute, and I cannot wait to take my own room and have Miss D'Angelo across the top of my board and have it be all Disney themed. I just can't wait. So that makes me very hopeful for what schooling will be. But obviously, as all of our careers have been affected by COVID, education is a biggie. So I'm very excited to talk about that today and to get that conversation rolling as well. But that's about me.
Oh
Claire,
my gosh.
take it away.
No, not quite yet. Not quite yet. We're not done with you, Miss Britini.
Oh, okay.
Claire said, never mind. Well, first of all, you are just so impressive.
I love you.
I think you might put all of our resumes to shame. You have all the certifications in the world.
Both of you are incredible. Stop it.
All of us are. But I do have a couple questions. Did you say which grade you want to teach, or are you still trying to figure that out?
So I do have a favorite. And I'm learning through subbing. I love 4th grade. I love 4th grade. And I think that has to do with the fact that my favorite teacher was my two favorite teachers in the world were my fourth and fifth grade teachers. But I love fourth grade so much because I just feel like their brains are they're just sponges in fourth. And I feel like anything, it's so receptive. I love the fourth grade curriculum. I've subbed in fourth a lot this year. And I would love to continue to work in fourth. But I also would love to do a special ed room in fifth and sixth. I think that that would be so cool. I think for me, a big perk is that if I teach theater, if I teach special ed, or I teach general ed, I win either way. Like I don't lose with any of the certifications that I have because I love all three of them. So I think that that's something that I'm fortunate for. Yeah, that's what I would say for that one.
I love your passion for teaching. I just love your passion for anything and everything that you do. And another question I have for you is, do you feel like your background in theater has kind of blended into your passion for education and teaching? I know you talked about how you went on tour and how you were able to teach a musical a week to kids and all of the age groups. So can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. Theater absolutely plays a big role in how I teach because I think of teaching as a performance. You have to be engaging or else those kids are not going to be receptive to you, especially because of the fact that you have to think with COVID being in place, those kids lost 5, 6, 7 months of school, depending on who they were. They could have lost 6, 7 months. They could have lost a year full of school. You know what I mean? So as a teacher, you have to perform to engage them because they didn't have that during COVID. So for me, absolutely. I think of every time I go in the classroom as a big old performance and I'm the main character, but also, but then I think to myself, I'm like, okay, so this person's going to play this character, but also like, it's so fun. Cause like, I love making learning interactive, and that's what theater is. Theater is an interactive art form. And so for me, I just love having the kids be a part of it. I love playing games with the kids. I love having competitions with the kids. I love giving them the opportunity to grow and step out of their comfort zones in terms of like reading a story. I'm like, no, we're not just reading. You're going to play popcorn. And then I'm going to throw like, we're going to play up, we're going to pass like a talking piece. And I'm going to throw the ball to you. And then you're going to throw it to the next person who's going to talk. And we're going to make it like, we're going to connect movement to the curriculum so that way they can piece those two things together, because that's so important, because anything that involves movement and learning just works so well. But any tactic that I can get them to like think differently, especially like I said, because COVID really set us back. Like any way that we can engage our kids more when they don't have their phones in front of them or when they don't have technology in front of them, we need to make it interactive or else we're going to lose them. And so, I mean, theater absolutely affects that because it allows you to interact more with your kids. It allows you to get to know your kids better. And it also fosters an environment of like, this is a safe environment and we can come to school and we can just have fun here. And this can be a place where I don't have to worry about what's going on at home. I can just focus on school, you know? So performance is fun, yo. That's how you teach. That's how we got to teach.
I love how you're able to marry both.
If we don't engage our kids, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole thing is like, I want my kids to I don't want them to just remember the curriculum. I want them to embrace the curriculum, and I want them to understand how it impacts their lives and how me taking the time out of my day to teach them about geometry and shapes actually means something to them long-term. So
that's a great perspective to have when teaching young ones. Okay, so I do have a couple questions about COVID and education. How do you think that in online education, because students were out of the physical classroom setting for a year to maybe even 2 years? I know some school districts in Illinois, back where I'm from, that are still online. So how do you believe that an online education, especially during some of the most critical developmental years, will manifest itself when these students are much older?
I think it's definitely going to have an impact, because not only did it affect them during crucial years in their lives, but it also affected them during crucial socialization years in their lives.
Yeah.
And it affected them in ways that, like, my kids forgot how to talk to other kids. They forgot how to communicate without a device in their hands. You know what I mean? Like there's the biggest piece that I've noticed is it's not even the learning, because the learning, we can catch up the learning. It's not an easy thing to do, but that we can catch up on. It's the communication that we've lost. It's that everything now is a device. Everything is through social media. Everything is all cyber. So people don't know how to communicate unless they're texting or if they're FaceTiming. But like face-to-face communication is no longer there. And then it's like, what is my body like? People, like my students forgot how to present body language to other kids, and how to say hi, or how to resolve problem solving. is a huge, I would say more than anything, I think the impact of COVID is going to be life skills and how these children can go about executing those life skills when they missed 2 crucial years to be with people. And I think at this point, we're kind of trying to play catch up, but we can only do as much as we can, because as much as we would love to let them socialize and love to let them gain those skills back in ways that we can, we do things like at our school, we do something called Move This World, where every morning they get to share and create this really safe environment, and they get to just allow themselves to just bond over similar topics. But we can't, well, like, obviously at the same time, we have to do the curriculum. So there's only so much of that we can do. But yeah, I would say the biggest impact is life skills. It's just how do we communicate effectively with other people? How do we communicate effectively with adults? Respect for elders. I think because an online school, you just saw a screen. You know what I mean? I mean, you did your work or you didn't. You know what I mean? There were both sides. But also, like, how do you communicate with adults effectively? Why? Because for online school, obviously there was a barrier between the school building and them. So does school really matter? That was a question of like, does it even matter that we're here? Because sometimes a lot of the kids thought that online school was pointless. So not all kids, but that was a perspective that was out there. So I think it's just an overall catch up, but I would say the biggest one's going to be life skills.
So just to make sure that I'm understanding your point, you do believe that there's going to be a perceivable difference between those that went to grade school during the pandemic versus those that went to school before the pandemic.
Yes, I would say there's going to be a difference. I would say it depends also on the kid, though. It also depends on, I mean, every child is different, obviously, especially, and also you have to take into consideration the home life that child has. That's a big part that plays into it. But in terms of that fact, I do believe that there's going to be a difference.
That's so interesting. And can you think of any maybe like positive outcomes for children?
Sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, I think on the one hand of needing to improve life skills, one of the biggest things that's come out of COVID is like students now have a new appreciation for coming to school. And I think that is a huge thing to come out of this pandemic, is like the kids, they missed school. Because for some of my kids, I mean, I work in an inner city school. My kids, all they have that makes like all some of my kids have is school. Like where I teach, 97% of my kids are in poverty. So like the light in their day is going to school. And I think it just gave a new appreciation for, you know what, this work is hard, but I get to come to school every day. I get to do this. COVID's not a thing anymore. I get to see my friends now. I think it's put a new appreciation on let's not take the things we have for granted because they can be stripped away from us just like this. You know, I think that's something that has been so important. I also think in terms of just school, I mean, they love hanging out with their friends and just being able to like see each other and just like high five, like something as simple as like a high five or a hug. You know what I mean? Like I get asked all the time by my kids, Miss Dangelo, can I give you a hug? I'm like, yeah, because you didn't have these for 2 years. Come here. Like I embrace them all the time because I know they didn't have that. And I know that they're learning, and I know that they want to learn because they don't want that break again. They want to keep going in school. So I mean, absolutely there are positives. You know, I also think that the fact of, online learning and the amount of programs that my kids use, I can name like 50 out the top of my head. Achieve 3000, Moby Max, Raz Kids, ABC, like the amount of online programs that were developed as a result of COVID and or were improved because of COVID that have now enhanced our students' learning is astronomical. It's completely changed the way that we teach. So that is absolutely a positive of COVID. I couldn't even think, why did I not think of that one first? Technology. You know what I mean? But
the effects of technology,
like the enhanced technology and how many programs we get to use with our kids on a daily basis. Like, I mean, all of our learning now is technological. Most of all of our learning uses their laptops because all of my kids have their own laptops. So it really has made groundbreaking improvements in that, which has been awesome for teaching because I mean, they're amazing resources. And I love the fact that we have access to those now.
Lovely. Erin White has one question for you. She says, Britini, I swear we are the same person. I'm 24 and just finished up my master's in secondary English education, and in undergrad, I double majored in theater arts and communication. Wow, you guys really are the same person.
Oh, we really are the same person.
I jumped from working with kindergarten last year to student teaching in 12th grade this year. My question is, As someone who has worked in multiple grade levels, how do you see students in different grades transitioning back into school post-COVID? My 12th graders have given up. How are the fourth graders doing? What skills are they lacking due to the disruptions these past several years? Which you kind of touched on, but I guess how do you see different age groups making that transition back?
Yeah, I definitely
Thanks,
think.
Erin.
Also, Aaron, thank you for the question. That's wow,
Yes.
we are really similar people. I love that. I would say, at least from what I've seen, the younger kids are adjusting better than the older. The older you go, the harder it is. Because the younger kids, I think for example, when I was TA in kindergarten and when I was student teaching in kindergarten, they're sponges. They just want to have fun and be there, and they're 5 and they're so cute, but like they're there and they want to learn, and they really do just whatever you throw at them, they're like, yes, Miss D'Angelo, let's do that. You know what I mean? Or like when we would like add and I would use like dice and I'd be like, throw the dice at me. And then we'd be like, boom. And I'd be like, got it. We're going to add 5 plus 5. They would love that. You know what I mean? So I think the little kids understood that something was happening, but then they got back to school and they were just kind of like, yeah, but I think still, I think little kids were obviously missing the socialization part, but then I think that they're now getting that back. But I do believe the older you go, the harder it got. Because at least I sub a lot in 4th and I sub a lot in 6th. And for me, there's a big difference between 4th and 6th in those kids. For 4th graders, I feel like they missed. So they got in COVID in 2nd, they missed 3rd, and then they're brought back for 4th. The biggest thing with 4th graders is honestly just communication. So with 4th graders, it's communication. And with 6th graders, it's how to communicate. It's not communication, it's how to communicate. And so it really is affected every grade level differently. But I do think, the more that you move up, it's just my 6th graders some of them are really motivated, but 6th grade is much harder to teach than 4th grade. Because like I said, 4th grade is still in that mindset of sponges. We're here, we got this. 6th grade at this point just wants to go to middle school. So some of them really want to get this done, but also like you really have, with 6th grade, I really have to work on new engaging skills to get them in the lesson. And then we can go through the lesson and then they're fine, which is great. It takes more effort for me. Like I really have to think, if I get a lesson plan from a teacher, I really have to think methodically of how I'm going to teach that lesson to make sure that they're engaged the whole time. With 4th grade, I can kind of go through whatever I need to do and they'll go with me. You know what I mean? I think there's more leeway. Like 4th grade will go with me. 6th grade, I've got to plan it out a little bit better, I guess is my biggest thing. Just because, that loss of time really did affect everyone differently. But that's what I would say for that question.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense because there's this thing called brain plasticity, which is, I guess, like the way that your brain kind of adapts to new situations. And it's my understanding that plasticity is a lot higher when you're younger. So it does, I guess it's not shocking to me that the older you are, the harder it becomes for you to adapt to new environments, such as transitioning from online education back to an in-person academic setting. Yeah, but it's so cool to hear like your personal account of that.
And I think the other thing to consider too is that, especially the older they got. So for Aaron's 12th graders, the last full year of school they had would have been 9th. Like that's the last full year of school they had. 10th got cut, 11th was awkward, and then 12th. Like for my 6th graders, the last full year of school they had was 3rd. So imagine missing 4th, coming halfway through 5th, and then you are plopped as the seniors in your elementary school. Like that is kind of that's the trajectory you have to think about of like, what grades did you miss? And like 4th and 5th for me were game changers. I don't know about y'all, but from those years for me were social game changers, at least for me in terms of how I progressed. So imagine missing those 2 years and then you come into 6th and you're supposed to be the most responsible kids in the school, but you missed 2 years before then. So but also for the high schoolers, that's the same kind of concept. You were in 9th and then your next full year of school is your senior year. You know what I mean? So, it's an interesting concept to think about, but it's very interesting when you break it down like that. I just thought about that right now. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Britini. We will most definitely get back to you, but now we move on to Miss Claire.
I'm Claire. For those of you who might not know me, I do AI, artificial intelligence at Microsoft. So working at a very different scale than Britini does. But, I got into this field, I think probably a little bit similarly to how you got drawn to science and medicine, Chaddha. I was very interested in math and science as a kid. That was always more of my inclination growing up, just something that I was passionate about, very interested in. And I was fortunate enough to have teachers who really enabled me in that interest and really let me develop those skills and those passions and encouraged me as I was going along elementary, middle, high school, saying, hey, why don't you go and try to do the advanced math class, the advanced computer science class? Why don't you give that a try? And my interest just bloomed. I ended up going to the University of Michigan and majoring in data science engineering, which at the time was a brand new major. And I think it was sort of a selling fact for me going through recruitment, casting for Big Brother, that I was one of the first females to actually graduate with that major from the University of Michigan. And for those of you who might not know, data science is really the combination of coding with statistics. So it's something that I'm sure a lot of you probably do if you're doing bioethics or a master's degree or graduate degree, are very familiar with working with large amounts of data and making predictions from it or trying to pull out patterns from it. And it was just something that fascinated me. I actually ended up writing like my senior thesis on responsible artificial intelligence and kind of the implications that go along with that. For a long time, artificial intelligence, machine learning was a field that was kind of let to run loose. And if you're not really sure what is artificial intelligence or machine learning, I sort of think about it as any opportunity where a human makes a decision, artificial intelligence might be able to play a piece in that. So some examples of like what is AI is also any kind of sense that a person has. So if you're looking at a photo, artificial intelligence, your brain is saying, what's in this photo? Let me try to decide what's in here. And AI can help inform you, hey, I've scanned this all and it looks like it's a photo of a man with a dog and they're on a beach. And I'm 86% confident that that is what is in this photo. Other examples might be if you're chatting with a chatbot, and it's not necessarily just a one-for-one. So I think I might be a little bit older, but if you had AIM and you talked to chatbots as a kid and they had somewhat of a smart response, that is AI as well. So it's a really big span of what is AI, what is ML, but it's also a very much developing field as we're getting more and more data from everything, any smart device, our phones, the internet. So many things are collecting data on us. As we're getting that data, you can then use that to make predictions, make inferences, and there's a lot of money there and a lot of potential for good and a lot of potential from bad, of course, too. So I said, hey, this is something I am very interested in and I actually want to go and pursue. Let me try to make an impact. I interned at Microsoft for 2 summers when I was in college, very fortunate enough to get that internship, get my foot in the door. And then once I was in there, really figure out what am I actually passionate enough about that I want to go and do that full time. Ended up at Microsoft in New York City, which is where I am now, and have been working on my team ever since. So essentially what I do is I help actually external teams develop AI, ML models for a wide variety of things. So for example, you know, Chaddha, in the house, you told us you were a fashion student. And, you know, I probably could have used your advice because I was working on this program actually for one of the biggest online female retailers. And they wanted to build a recommendation engine for, hey, someone's buying this top. What are pants that we could recommend them, shoes that we could recommend them, accessories that we could recommend them that go with this style. And so you can't just say, oh, it's a white top, let's give them this blue skirt, but like actually looking at what's the fabric, what are the details, and trying to be able to predict what is stylish, what is cool, what will this person buy, also based off their past purchases. Do they already have a blue skirt? Okay, we don't need to sell them that. Are they very into elegance? I don't know. Let's try to, you know, sell them that. So things like that. And then when COVID hit, we saw a whole new wave of potential for AI. So with the wave of COVID, of course, everyone moved online. Like Britini was saying, all those new cool technologies that opened up the doors for a ton of students. Let me tell you, a lot of projects I worked on in the early days of COVID were around that, actually helping educators figure out how do we get online and what can we actually use now that we're kind of collecting some data, which I think has, you know, interesting ethical implications of collecting data on students as well. But what can we really use to improve, you know, education? Of course, there's been a long history, and I'm laughing because my mom's a radiologist. And so when I was going into the field of computer science, she was like, well, there's a lot of studies out there about how you can predict breast cancer actually with computer vision, you know, sending this through to a robot and it tells you, oh, hey, you have breast cancer, you don't have breast cancer. Granted, I think they've been working on those models for like decades now, and I don't really know if any are in production. But with the rise of COVID, we saw a lot of researchers start doing research and can we predict, does someone have COVID, and can we predict how serious is it going to be? You know, I think 2 years since then, we've seen almost now, almost to the day of a little past 2 years since then, though, the crux of COVID and you know, the United States, we've seen that it was a huge failure. Very few algorithms were actually successful. I think I read something like there was a study on 230 algorithms that were made to diagnose patients, and of those, only 2 were actually used in a clinical setting, and those were failures. Because unfortunately, when COVID hit, to make a prediction, you have to have past data. You have to have some kind of historical information that you're making your predictions on. And the data that was coming in from all these hospitals. All these hospitals want to try to help. And so they're feeding in all of the images, all the data into, you know, these researchers' data files. And what a machine learning algorithm will do is it'll recognize patterns and then tell you like, yeah, this is COVID. No, this is not COVID, whatever. And unfortunately, a lot of the data that was sent in was, you know, hodgepodge together. So you have, you know, images from one hospital, images from another, and some of them aren't that good. So for example, they had a data set that involved some patients sitting up and some patients laying down, a variety of different images. And they thought that they were predicting if someone had COVID with a high accuracy, because it was like, you know, really nailing them. You give it the algorithm a new image and it's like getting it with high accuracy. But when they actually looked at what that model was doing, it was just looking at, is the patient sitting up or are they laying down? Because if someone has COVID, you know, very intensely, most likely they're going to be laying down. And so all the algorithm was looking at was like, is this person sitting or laying? So not actually that useful in the real world situation, you know, and there's 1,000 other examples like that. Like one hospital was sending in images and they had their hospital name at the bottom and it was a different font from a different hospital. And the first hospital was having a huge wave of COVID. And so with high accuracy, if the algorithm saw that, oh, this image is from this hospital, let's just say it's COVID, and it was getting good accuracy because that was the data it had seen of, hey, if I see this new image and it's from this hospital, no matter what, the lungs look like, we're just going to say it's COVID. Which of course, then when you go and you take that same model and try to apply it to a new hospital, it won't work because it's not seeing that hospital name. So I think a lot of people in the AI space recognized the potential drawbacks of AI and ML on real world problems at a timely manner, especially if you don't have someone who's a medical professional in the loop. Because, me, a computer scientist, like, I'm just typing, I'm not really recognizing all these issues. But if you have a doctor, a PA, a nurse, someone who has some knowledge in there and are looking at the results with you, they might be able to flag like, hey, actually looking at this image, this isn't COVID, this isn't looking right. Like, what are they actually using to make this prediction? So I think because of COVID, a lot of researchers have really taken a step back and said, instead of just going full charge ahead, let's actually try to bring in subject matter experts into our loop, people who actually know how this will be applied, and really look at it in that way. COVID also had a lot of other effects. I think COVID had a huge impact in women in STEM in the workplace. A lot of, and across all different, fields of a lot of women leaving the workforce to go and take care of parents, go and take care of their children, homeschooling, all of that. And I think that has been a huge detriment to STEM, where women are already underrepresented. And although I think there are very encouraging numbers for the women who are majoring in STEM or STEAM, I know as Brittany likes to call it, with the arts as well. Even with a lot of women majoring in that, it's tricky if you don't have mentors in the field to really look up to and really be able to model your career off of. So I think COVID has been interesting for the field of AI, which is already rapidly changing, but it definitely has, precipiced more changes to come as well. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
You are so cool. Oh my gosh.
I really just talked for a long time. I'm a talker. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh. I'm just so happy that you guys are here. I remember in Jury House when we could finally share things about ourselves with each other, you did mention how you have an interest in machine learning ethics.
Yeah.
That's not okay. Imagine if you said, no, that was Tiff. Okay, that was you. So can you talk about some ethical topics that pertain to AI and machine learning that you're interested in learning more about? I know in class last week, we talked about brain-computer interface, and the week before that, we talked about artificial intelligence. And it was interesting to me because in both classes, a majority of the students were like, we just have to quit while we're ahead. We have to ban AI. We have to ban further development of brain-computer interface. And that was kind of their stance. Whereas I more so took up the position, I'm pretty sure that rapidly advancing AI and brain-computer interface are inevitable at this point. So how do we kind of change our ethical standards to accommodate the problems that might arise from, those two fields? So just if you would like to share some of your interests.
Yeah. No, I think that is really interesting. And that's actually something that I think about highly in my job. So I actually co-lead the responsible AI and ML kind of V team inside of my organization. And we deal with external teams. So that's a question that we always ask people is, there's a lot of issues. I understand where the people are coming from of saying like, let's shut down AI, let's shut down on ML, let's ban, all these predictions. But the thing is, and this is also, me kind of talking with a Microsoft mouthpiece, I guess, people are going to do it. People are going to make these predictions. People are going to be using ML if it can, save a couple bucks. And so wouldn't you rather have a say in how it's used and kind of the ethics and standards around it? So like just thinking of one, I think it's been a major topic is facial recognition, right? And so a few years ago, some researchers at Google actually decided to look at the accuracy of their facial recognition technology and actually look at it across a wide swath of people. And so they looked at the accuracy of the model on, they classified it as like light-skinned men and women, and then darker-skinned men and women, and evaluate their accuracy. And perhaps a surprise to no one, for lighter-skinned males, aka white men, the accuracy was almost 100%. And then when they looked at white women, depending on what company, basically all companies have their own facial recognition technology: Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. It's pretty run of the mill. White women, a little bit lower, but like 97%. Light skinned men was about 90%, or dark skinned men were about 90%. And then when it came to darker skinned women, it was only at like 70%. So these facial recognition technologies were just not built to be able to facially recognize Black women, darker skinned women at all. Especially you can think, and then these researchers wondered, why is this? And for the most part, it's because of who trained the models. It was white men, lighter skinned men, who were using their own photos to test it and make sure that, hey, everything looks good, right? Yeah, it looks good. Like we tested on everyone in the office and it messed up on a couple of people, but like, it's probably fine. Let's just send it out. And that has huge repercussions, especially when you think about how this technology eventually started getting used at police stations and to do policing in communities. And so when the technology performs worse on a subset of people, we started seeing Black men getting pulled into police stations and being told, you were robbing this bank, and we have you actually, our technology identified that this is you, and therefore we're going to arrest you and we're going to make you go to court and all these things. Now they have huge fines, all of this because the algorithm was faulty. And so Microsoft looked at this and said, especially post George Floyd. And, I think there was a huge reckoning in technology of what are our roles in, the systemic oppression of minorities. What's our role in this? And Microsoft actually decided to stop selling facial recognition technology to police. And, really took a look at that and said, we don't really think we want to be a part of this. That's one area where I think there's a ton of research that's been done. A lot of these algorithms have since been improved, but the researchers from Google who recognized it were actually two women, a white woman and a Black woman, who, knew that this was an issue and really drew attention to it. So it just also emphasized the importance of diversity in the field. Another huge interest of mine is around language. And so, there are a lot of real big models out there right now. Maybe you've seen them, that you type in like, oh, give me a recipe for, I don't know, casserole, like something absurd, like cotton candy casserole. And a machine learning model will be able to automatically generate a recipe for this. It's mind-bending stuff. It's huge, it's wild, very, very cool. But this, these models are trained on historic data. And so whenever you train a model on data, that model will pick up the biases in that data. So if you're training it on data from whenever, the 60s, 70s, 80s, you're going to have those same biases that people had back then. And this has been a big issue. So for example, if you type in, so something that the computer can do is kind of create sentences on its own. And so if you type in like an analogy, like businessman is to husband as blank is to wife, it will automatically put in like home cleaner is to wife. So automatically putting in these biases, which can cause a ton of inherent issues of how do we gender our language and speech, and that is something that is going to be very hard to change and hard to fix, but it causes, you have to be conscious of it when you're doing it. So those are just two areas of kind of responsible AI that are interesting to me.
It's almost paradoxical that the purpose of AI is to kind of correct for our human biases, or at least one of the purposes, one of its very many functions. Yeah. Yet it just reinforces, in some ways, the biases that we have. So thank you for that. We do have, actually, I have another question for you.
Okay.
Kind of related to what it means to be an AI engineer as well as a Big Brother player, because you two know this. For those that aren't familiar, in Big Brother, you almost have to be very impersonal, because you're playing a game where, you're manipulating people. You want to make it to the end. You have to be selfish. So you kind of have to disconnect and almost shut off your empathy. That's if you want to go far. If you don't want to do that, hey, maybe you can still go far, or maybe you'll be the first one eliminated. Who knows? But do you feel like AI engineers almost have to do that? Because when you start to think about the ethical repercussions of the field that you're in, is it almost, or would it be like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Am I contributing to the downfall of the human race? I almost feel like it would be very overwhelming to always be conscientious of the impact that you're having on the human species and humanity. So do you feel like that switch has to be turned off?
I mean, I think it's hard, because I think the correct answer here is that people working in AI should be the most empathetic and the most conscious of the repercussions of their actions, because their actions can ripple down a million different ways. And so you have to be very, very conscious of it when you're going through and building a model, and really look at who are the people that this model is going to impact. Do we have them top of mind? Because it's very easy to build a model and, not really think about who is this going to impact. Is it good for them, or is it bad? And you have to do that at all levels, right? You have to do that down to the coder, to the person actually deciding, hey, let's make this model, to the CEO of a company. But to a little bit, I don't know. I think if you want to go and build ML for nefarious purposes, that's up to you. And then I guess in that respects, you're probably going to shut down your empathy and say, screw it, I'm writing code that I will never see the impacts of. This will impact someone halfway around the world. But people do a lot of those jobs. That's not a job I would necessarily want to do. But I'm sure there are people who would be okay doing it. I think it's easy to distance yourself and imagine this will be fine and not have impact. But I think it's important that a lot of people doing ML are very conscientious of it.
So you're almost saying that you guys have to be some of the most mindful people, even though the technology that you're developing kind of removes that sense of mindfulness that we have.
I think so. I think it's something, like I said, we go and we talk to a lot of groups, and we're always very intense on who will this impact actually? Because you might think it's, the people you're selling it to, but who's that actually going to come down to affecting? And when you're building those models, you have to be so aware of that.
And then my last question, kind of tying it back to COVID, which is what we're here to discuss. COVID has illuminated some of the inequality and inequity that exists in society. We've kind of just brushed the surface, including the lack of female representation in STEM. And you mentioned a couple minutes ago that you were among the first women to graduate in data science engineering from your university, which just amazing. So now that we're perhaps starting to confront issues concerning lack of representation more seriously, do you believe that females will start to be represented more in STEM?
There's a lot that makes me hopeful. So I was recently looking at a study about women, Gen Z women, who I like just missed that cutoff of, and something like 60% of Gen Z women in the United States have had some experience coding, have some experience with computer science. Of those female coders, a huge portion of them know multiple languages, and are, really have a foot in the door. I don't know what your experience was like, Chaddha. I know your education was like a little wonky, but I think that makes me very hopeful, because I know a lot of the women, at least when I was going through, I graduated and I should have been like 2018, was a lot of the women started their first class, looked around and realized, well, all the men in this class have a lot more experience than I do. And therefore I'm way behind. Computer science is a huge learning curve. Your first class is always going to be your hardest one. And so they stopped majoring in it, and dropped out and just said, I love, I can go and be very impactful in other fields, still in STEM, just maybe not computer science. Feels like the guys know what they're doing. I'm going to let them run with it. And so I think it's very encouraging to me to see a lot more Gen Z women, the I generation or whatever it's called, having more experience with coding. Granted, I think like if you just say we just need to fix the pipeline, I think that's really glossing over a lot. And I think actually recruiting from schools, the pipeline goes all the way up. And then, like I said, I think there has been a huge decline in women in the industry because of COVID, as much as COVID has also made us relook kind of as we go virtual and more jobs are opening up. I think women are realizing, hey, there might not be a lot of other women at this company. I think I'm going to swap to another company. That's also what's nice is tech is just hiring like bananas right now. If you want a job in tech, you can probably find a job in tech. I don't want to breeze it over, but it's like a huge absence right now. So many more jobs than there are people to fill them, which I think is also awesome because, who doesn't want jobs? May as well go to this field. But we're also seeing a lot. I think one of the biggest struggles why women don't keep going in the field is a lot of them aren't promoted to first manager. And so if you're not a first level manager, you can't move up the chain, and then you don't have more women in leadership. You don't have women to sponsor other women getting into that managership role. So even if we get women in the pipeline, I think it's still a struggle, but I'm definitely hopeful, the eternal optimist in me. But we'll see. I don't know. I think it's a big problem. I don't have the answer to it, but I think it's something to be aware of.
Of course. Yeah. No one's asking you how to,
thank God.
No one's asking you how to completely rectify the lack of female representation.
Here's my 20-point plan.
Yes.
Imagine the next 5 years. Please turn every number in the next 5 years. Please. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we are going to move into just one question for each of us from Grace, who is our undergrad bioethics intern. Shout out to Grace. Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking these questions. We're just going to start with Britini. And since we do have to wrap up in 20 minutes, maybe we can spend 10 minutes on this, 10 minutes on the Big Brother stuff. Okay, so Grace wants to know, how can a first grader who didn't meet academic benchmarks move up a grade? Aren't all kids behind now? Should the age and grade system change because of long-term COVID ramifications?
Interesting question. Okay. So this has been, okay. So I can only answer this question from what I know. I'm not an actual, like, I am a substitute. So I'm not an actual teacher. So I can't go by benchmark. What I will tell you is it's very hard to fail someone right now because of the fact that they missed the year. So the teachers, like, we all understand that this has been a very uncharacteristic year. They've had 2 uncharacteristic years the years prior. So the standards have now changed. And the goal also, I think that this needs to be said, the goal is never for a teacher to be like, this kid's going to fail, especially in first grade. That's not what any of us want to do. So the objective is, at this point, at least from what I've seen, if you are a first grader that's not meeting benchmarks, we have 3 months left of the school year. If I'm taking this from March 31st, I have 3 months, or like 2.5. I have 2.5 months to get you to a point where I can confidently send you into second grade with something in mind of just letting your teacher know, hey, this is where they're at. Because obviously that passes with every child anyways in terms of their portfolio. But I have 2.5 months to get you there. And or if I don't get you there, how close can I get you to that place? There also are way more supports that are being put in place now as well in order to help those kids get to that point. So the goal at this point is, if they're not meeting benchmarks, what supports do we need to put in place to get them to meet that goal? Academic interventions, supports, things like that. That's what we're trying to do at this point. It's just a different time. It really is. Just with COVID, it really is a different time in terms of, like, it's not a fair evaluation to be like, this kid needs to be at a first grade level, because are they? Could they be? I mean, you think of a first grader, right? They weren't in school for that year, for that 3 years. So 3 years prior, they were in preschool. Pre-K got cut. Kindergarten missed. First grade. That's a lot of developmental years in the play. So at this point, I would say failing them is not really the answer. It's not really, at least in our district, what we're going for. It's more or less of putting the academic interventions into place. We have a program called PEP where they go and they get extra interventions and supports that way. And just how can we help this child get as close to the benchmark as possible, I guess is what the objective is now.
Gotcha. And then for Claire, Grace said, how widespread is facial recognition software? And because of this and other forms of data monitoring, should we all just give up the idea of privacy, which is a huge bioethical topic that we discuss and deliberate in our classes, because the right to privacy and the principle of autonomy are the foundations of our government. Really the foundations of any, like, Western society. So does racial recognition software impede on our privacy?
I mean, if you own an iPhone, you have a facial recognition software built in. You use it every single day, take your mask off, put it up and get in. If you fly a plane recently, they've been testing, I think Delta has been testing software to do facial recognition as you're boarding a plane. So you don't necessarily have to, like, scan boarding passes, everything else. If you use Clear at an airport, that has your retina and that has your thumbprint. I think there are studies that in New York City, you are on camera. You cannot get around the city of New York City without being on camera. And we'd be fools to think, even though Microsoft isn't selling facial recognition technology to the police, that they aren't doing facial recognition on every single person that comes through New York City. Maybe they're not, but they can pretty much find you if they want to find you, let alone, conspiracies abound. But of course, I think a lot of facial recognition technology, sometimes it's good. I don't want to just, lay down the law and say, hey, facial recognition technology is horrible in every single instance. I think for a lot of instances, it might not be beneficial, especially because we've seen it's not accurate. But you can't imagine situations where it might be beneficial, even going down to logging onto your computer, or if you're taking the SAT test and, it has to be digital. How do we make sure that this person actually is who they say they are? And then in terms of privacy, I think that I don't want to say, like, privacy is dead in the modern age, but I think it's very hard for a person to go through the world and have privacy. I think everything can be tracked down, to your IP address, let alone, I think everyone has had the experience of you type in a shoe on your phone and then on your sister's computer, that same shoe pops up. And it's because your data has been linked. If you're using Facebook, if you're using Instagram, any kind of social media, they're able to track you when you go on different websites. If you go on a website and it has something like, oh, like this website, like our company, that it seems innocuous enough, but actually what that is it has a little cookie in it. If you say accept cookies, that's tracking you across all your web pages you're going. So Facebook, even if you're not on Facebook, knows every single website you went to. Instagram knows every single website you went to. And they know based off your IP address, hey, you're normally in the room at the same time as this other phone. You must know this other person, and I'm going to send them ads as well, which is why sometimes you'll see that cross of information. I think there's a really common example of Target actually sent this father, there was this family and they got a ad in the mail for baby diapers from Target. And this man called up Target and said, excuse me, like, why are you sending me this ad right now? How dare you? So rude. No one in my family is pregnant. My wife, has gone through menopause and my daughter's only 16. So why would you send me this? And they said, oh, very sorry. Like, we have an automated machine learning algorithm that, targets ads, must have been a mistake. Our apologies. He really read them out. He hung up. A week later, he called back and said, actually, my apologies. My daughter just told me that she was pregnant. So Target knew before this father did that his daughter was pregnant based off of, her searching history, maybe what she bought at Target. She bought, lotions or a pain medication, a pregnancy test. And then they fed that back into their system. Granted, they stopped sending out pregnancy ads so early on in pregnancies, but that's just an example of how, privacy is really being diminished, but there's not really a ton that we can do to stop it right now without laws really restricting what data can you use, how much information should consumers have with their data, and so on. So it's a tricky subject.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And, it's interesting because in the Big Brother house, which, all of us experienced, we don't have privacy because we're being filmed 24/7. And even when the live feeds aren't on, we're still being watched by production and cameramen, et cetera, et cetera. But people will ask me, like, was it strange to think about just the, I guess, invasiveness of the whole experience and the sheer lack of privacy? But to be honest, it's not that much different from what everyone else experiences because of technology. So that's why I wanted to ask you that question. And Grace had a question for me too. I'm gonna make it really quick. Has COVID changed what you want to study or the kind of profession you are aiming for? Do your current studies seem more important? So COVID has not changed what I want to study. Coming into this program, I wanted to be a doctor. I still want to be a doctor, but I think COVID, because we were isolated and sequestered for so long and everything was shut down, it made myself, as well as a majority of people, I think, value interpersonal and face-to-face connection that much more. And I think that's what's missing from the practice of medicine. I think medicine has become a lot more technical. So if anything, COVID has just reinforced why I want to do what I want to do. And that's all I'll say about that. So thank you so much for the people who asked questions in the Q&A, for people who asked questions in the chat, and Grace, our bioethics undergrad intern, and shout out to Claire and Brittany for answering those questions so thoughtfully. So now that we've ended the presentation content questions, we can move on to just a few questions about the show and our experience. I know that's what a lot of people are probably interested in hearing. So we're going to do like a little rapid fire round because we have less than 10 minutes. Okay. Brittany, Claire, myself, what is your fondest memory from the house?
Oh, I have so many. Rapid fire though?
Pick one. Pick one.
Oh, like okay. Okay. After winning Kingdom of Carlot, when Derek and Azza ran faster down that spiral staircase than I've ever seen them run in their entire lives, and they literally jumped on top of me, gave me the largest hug, and then we started screaming "Jokers, Jokers, Jokers," and it never made the episode. It's fine. But it was right after I won the Denialator that it was just like the biggest celebration ever. And then Claire jumped in, Tiff jumped in, and there was like one group celebrating with me and one group trying to make sure Alyssa was okay. And it was just like half and half of like what was going on. That was my favorite moment.
That backyard was chaos.
That was chaos.
Oh my God. That was definitely Britney's moment to shine. And I have never seen Derek Frazier run that fast.
Anyway. No, they sprinted and we were all just jumping in a group. We were like, Joey, teams were over, but we were like, Jokers, Jokers. It was a moment I will never forget, was just celebrating with the two of them afterwards, because it solidified that like teams had been over, but now the family was solidified. You know what I mean? So that was my favorite moment.
Love that. Claire?
I think probably similarly, like I never won an HOH, right? I had my secret one, but that didn't count. Anytime someone I was aligned with won HOH, it was like the highest high you could experience. Like the second week when Kylan won it, like I knew my name had been thrown around. And when he won it, like it was just so sweet. And then, that just continued anytime, like Derek then won, Tiff won again. That one we don't talk about. But just the joy of like, someone that like I'm rooting for, that I'm a friend of, let alone like, I think I'm safe, but like someone that I really care about has won this thing. Like that's so awesome. Just very high highs in that game and very low lows, but very high highs.
Oh my God. It was so funny, like seeing people kiss up to the HOH that week, especially when you knew that you were safe. I'm sorry, I keep bringing it back to Big D, Derek Frazier. But anytime he felt like he was in any, remote danger, he would be in that kitchen cooking tacos, cooking nachos, cooking omelets, waiting on the HOH hand and foot. He just, my fondest memory doesn't have anything to do with the game itself, but it was, it would probably have to be Travis hosting Mafia.
What a good memory.
Travis as Travissa, just the way. And someone recently sent me a video of him hosting, and I don't know where the Travis voice came from because he was speaking normally the entire time. But for some reason, like all of our brains just completely rewrote that memory, and we have him. I don't know. We like made up a voice for Travis, and that's not actually how he speaks. But that was just hilarious. Okay, what was your favorite competition to participate in? Britt, I think I know what you're going to say.
Okay, but it's a tie for me. Okay. So it's Kingdom of Carlot, obviously, but then Funtan Lotion. Funtan was so fun. I love falling on my butt and then getting back up again. Like I love falling with my bucket still in the air. I really felt like I was a queen in that moment, because I was like, I fell and my water bucket's still in the air.
Yes.
Powerful in that moment.
Mine is OTAV, just such a classic. How could you not?
Yes. Disgusting. You remember how jealous I was?
Oh yeah.
You could have taken my spot. Please. I sucked at that competition. You could have taken my spot.
Not at all. You came in fourth, right?
Not me searching for 7 whole minutes for the Whitney and Brett jar when it was in Oz's pants.
No.
I can't.
Wait, do you guys still remember your days? Because I feel like I still do.
I was trying to think of like the name of a comp, and I could not remember it. I think I know roughly the days up until jury started. Then I stopped studying.
Gotcha. Because I still remember like people's times from Funtan Lotion.
I remember all the times. That I do. Numbers I remember, but like I also remember the song, like day 1 HOH, we played House of Cards, day 2 Duna. I still remember that song.
Real quick, I'd have to say my favorite comp was BB Comics. Dressing up like a superhero was everything, and it's such an iconic Big Brother staple. So BB Comics. Can we get a final 3 name, because this was never a final 3 in the game? What would it be called?
Would have been a really good Final Three, though. Let's just put that out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Underdogs.
What about I don't know.
What were you thinking of?
Literally, I was gonna say ABC because Brittany's name starts with a B, your name starts with a C, but your name doesn't start with why I don't know how I came up with that.
Like BCC, like Brittany, Chaddha, Claire,
Yeah,
and we would be like the email squad.
The email. Okay, team email.
Like Team Outlook.
Oh,
Email.
send everyone out one by one. Oh,
Oh,
oh my
we
God.
just hit send. We just hit send.
You just hit send.
our
Oh my-
motion is like us clicking a mouse.
Yes.
It's like we walk each other in the house and we're like,
Yeah, that's good.
Team email, team Outlook.
email.
Okay, would each of you play again if asked?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. CBS, if you are watching this panel, which
Yeah, put us on the same season. Email.
you have
Yeah.
my number, you have Britt's number, you have Claire's number. Just let us know. We're available.
They also have all of our emails.
Yes, that too. Team email, so we can finally, fulfill and realize team Outlook in the house. Okay, so now I have a very quick question for each of you, including myself. Brittany, you were such a bright light in the house. This is coming from a fan on Instagram. How were you able to smile and laugh throughout the whole summer in such a stressful environment and pressure cooker? Which I'm curious about.
I wonder about that every day as well. But I will say, I guess the way that I did it was, that's the only way I know how to live life. It's just like I knew going into the house that the only person that I had is myself, and I didn't want to lose any part of my personality. And my personality is to be positive in every stressful environment that I've been in. So I don't think that changed. Also, I was living out a dream. So like, no matter how many times y'all put me up on the block, thank you all very much. No matter how many times that happened, I knew I was safe. Number one. Number two, I knew I was going to get through the week, but also like it was a dream. It was a dream to play the show. So like, even like waking up every morning, you just say thank you that you're even in that house in the first place, and you embrace every moment too. And also the game happens, but you do have a lot of downtimes that also contribute to you being more positive in the house as well. But no, that's all I know how to do is be positive during stressful situations. So I would say that it doesn't really deviate from my normal routine. But also it's really exhausting to be negative. So I don't want to do it.
Yeah, no, I think
that's
in a game like Big Brother, for sure.
It's exhausting to try and stress yourself out all the time with what could be at some point, and especially in a game like Big Brother, you just kind of got to be like, okay, these are the cards that I'm dealt. How do you deal with it?
Exactly. I love that about you. That's honestly my favorite thing about you. And then with Claire, you formed some pretty tight relationships in the house, again, from a fan. And it was evident that people were drawn to you and loved spending time with you. So were you surprised by how well you and your cast were able to connect on a personal level?
Yes. I think my last week going, Azza asked me, like, why'd you come here? Why did you play Big Brother? Like, what was your deeper reason? And my reason was really, I wanted to see if I could socially connect to people. I was very nerdy growing up. I had some very good friends, very deep friends, but I didn't have very many. And I wanted to know, was I still kind of that weird kid in the back of the classroom on our computer? And I think the first week I was like, I really didn't connect with that. I had Tiff, I actually had Brit, I had Azza, I had Kai. But like, people didn't really know me. People didn't know my personality, because I think when I go into situations, I have a wall. I would say I'm more introverted. But I think our cast was very introverted, which is something you and I have talked about, Chaddha, of like, you're somewhat introverted, X is pretty introverted. A few of us are very introverted. And once I was able to relax, I was really able to build those bonds and build very deep friendships with people, which was like a breath of fresh air and very, very nice, and very meaningful to me. So I was very surprised, to say the least. I also thought everyone was going to be like a loser and weird, and that like I wouldn't like anyone. Like, come on, like we watch reality TV. Like, those people are wild. And so I was very pleasantly surprised by all the amazing, inspiring people that I met there and the deep friendships that I wanted to build and I did build.
I love that. Yeah, I was also very pleasantly surprised. I feel like I've gained so many lifelong friends, including Britini, including Claire. If you guys can't tell, we genuinely adore each other a lot. Genuinely, genuinely. And then someone asked me, Hannah, how much of being the little sister of the house was an act, or do you naturally find yourself in that role in your real life relationships? So that's kind of interesting because I've always been around older people. I started university right after my 16th birthday, and I graduated when I was 19. And so I was the same age when I graduated as a lot of freshmen are and a lot of sophomores are. But I don't really find myself kind of fulfilling that little sister role in my real life relationships. I kind of see my peers as equals. But in the house, yes, I very much leaned into that. And now that we're out of the house, I still feel like the cast's little sister, but it's not an act anymore. I think I have just grown to look up to everyone. Like everyone is a role model for me. Britini, I look up to her. Claire, I look up to her. Like I said, we genuinely adore each other, and these people have become family. And because I am so much younger, and because I recognize that these people have more wisdom than me and more life experience than me, and they have a lot to impart and share with me, and I'm eager to learn from them, I think that's why I still feel like everyone's baby sis, and I'm happy to be that. It's no longer me, trying to make it farther in the game. That's just what it is, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful to continue learning and growing with these people and because of these people. So with that being said, thank you to Miss Britini. Thank you to Miss Claire for all of your insight today. You guys are intelligent and you're just mind-blowing to me. I love the women on our cast. Anyway, where can we find sorry, where can we find each of you on social media?
So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We're still learning how to tweet people, so give me time. But Instagram and TikTok are both Britini_Dangelo, and then Twitter is just Britini D'Angelo, no underscore. Don't ask me why it's different. I should just make it the same. But there is no underscore on Twitter, but Instagram and TikTok do have the underscore.
Perfect. Follow Britini so you can keep up with her. It's well worth it. Claire?
Mine is first name, last name, Claire Rehfuss, all together. You can follow me to see me not post things. So yeah.
But when she posts things, they're iconic. Let me just say that. Like a post from Claire is not just a post. It's like it's the same thing with Chaddha. Because whenever they both post, I'm waiting for their post. But when they do post, I'm like, oh my God. Aw, how cute. Or how gorgeous. I'm like, but follow the both of them. Yes.
It's just because I haven't figured out technology yet, but I am very active on Twitter. I am very opinionated.
Me as well.
You can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Hannah_Chaddha, I think. If you can't find me, that's okay. And then on Instagram, I'm just Hannah Chaddha. So I would also like to thank everyone in this webinar who took the time out of their day to be here, as well as the LMU Bioethics Institute for sponsoring this panel. If you want to learn more about bioethics and the LMU Bioethics Institute, you can go to their website. I'm pretty sure it's just www.lmubioethics.edu. I had a lot of fun today with both of you, and I hope that we can make this a recurring event so that we can continue to combine our love for Big Brother with our real world passions and meaningful topics. And to show our appreciation for everyone's attendance, we're going to be picking 3 participants at random to receive some LMU swag and merch. So keep a lookout for an email from us in the near future. And thank you again. Oh, sorry, it's lmu.edu/bioethics. I should probably know that. I'm so sorry. It's in the chat. Thank you again, everyone, and have an amazing day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys.